but it's felt like it's been a escalating amount of coverage of Biden's gaffes. And maybe they're
Yeah,
so
because it was
frequent,
like
it's
because they were so
unignorable.
bad. Joe Biden is worth probably one, like maybe even 3/5 Obama. In some of your coverage, I believe you were genuinely delusional when it comes to your analysis of how strong Donald Trump is right now.
I feel like the Democrat voter base has gotten to the point where it will yell and it will complain, but more often than not, especially when it's Trump that we're up against, we kind of come out and we vote.
It'll totally beat Medicare.
Hello? Can you
Hello?
hear me? Oh. Hello.
Oh. Yeah. You sound good. You sound good. Do I sound good?
You sound good, buddy.
Alrighty. All right, good. Discord setup can sometimes be a hassle. This time, we've got our stuff set up. Nice.
Perfect.
Alrighty, how you doing?
Okay. I just I just got back at it with streaming. I've been gone for a while. I was on a health journey. I was on a spiritual journey. I was traveling down the hashish travel paths of Azerbaijan to look for self-enlightenment. I was taking hot air balloons filled with my own dreams to the top of the Himalayas to talk to Sherpas about the matters that be of the universe, here and back from time immemorial. I was in with doctors. I was exploring the depths of my mind, the depths of my heart, and the depths of what connects us all to this great world, the ribbons of life that spin from the spider of fate that we all are trapped in, of this beautiful web that we call life. I was basically surfing human consciousness to find a wave that was so gnarly that it would blow my lizard brain part of my brainstem, shock it back into order, basically. And I got some new medicine. So yeah, I think I'm doing pretty all right.
Hell yeah! You're telling me you're the new Avatar, the current iteration. I actually heard that you'd gotten into an accident. I'm glad. It seems like you're okay. I hope there weren't any injuries. Are you doing all right?
Oh yeah, my girlfriend got into a car crash, unfortunately, with my car. Car got totaled, sadly. Here in Kentucky, we got deer, big ones, big deer.
Oh.
And he hopped from the darkness while she was driving back home, and goosh, smashed into the car. Bitch exploded like a watermelon. And the girlie was almost inconsolable. Thankfully, the car kept her safe, but not my bank account, because the car is now totaled and I didn't have gap insurance. So it was a cheaper car and insurance won't pay out the whole thing. So I'm just left with a bit of a bill that I need to pay off, and I can't get a new car just yet. So, we've had our ups and downs, but the GF is okay. And so that's the most important thing. But yeah, I'm okay. Other than that, I have this bandage on my arm, but it's not because of any injury. I just got bored one day and started scratching my arm and accidentally peeled the skin off of a giant chunk. And so I got a band-aid to keep it clean. But I kind of want to tell people that I was bit by a shark or something.
Yeah, that's a more fun story, I think. But gosh, I'm glad everyone's okay. Although I'm sad the car didn't make it out better. I don't think the deer ever had a chance, though. Oh.
Yeah, deer did not make it.
About that.
But yeah, I mean, it's a bit sad. It was the first car I ever bought, and it meant a whole lot to me. Because I bought it with all the money that I made during streaming, and I was like, oh man, like I'm not sure if this was the right path, but getting the car felt like an affirmation of all the work that I put into this channel. So losing it was very sad, as well as like it was just a nice. It was a Honda Fit, as well. It fit my my lifestyle perfectly, actually. But now she is gone, unfortunately. But it is what it is here in Kentucky. It is. That's just Kentucky for you. Yeah. Thank you for thank you for letting me tell my sap story in a natural way that didn't seem like I'm farming for money. But hopefully somebody now donates $500,000 to fix all my woes. Appreciate that, buddy.
Oh yeah, I mean, I know how to set up other streamers for a good dono spree.
Yeah, great pass. So, great pass. You should be at the Olympics for volleyball with that one. Good set.
It's real smooth. Anyway, yeah, you hit me up on Twitter, I think a week and a half ago, and you said you'd watched some of my content about Biden and the coverage of Biden in the media and the whole like Biden should step down thing. And I guess this is kind of old news now, and I guess that kind of benefits the conversation more because we can look at it more with hindsight. But I was curious what you wanted to talk about in regards to it.
Sure, yeah. While I was gone, just because I was gone doesn't mean I wasn't paying attention to a lot of stuff. So I was covering just about everything and reading through everything as much as I possibly could. And I stumbled upon some of the streams that you were doing contemporaneously, and also like after you made most of your streams. And I was listening through them because you had more of like a stance that was way more on the side of Biden should not step down. It was a bad idea for him to step down. And on top of that, it was a bad idea for people to say that he should step down, which is actually an opinion that I had earlier in the month of July. But after some time, I did change my mind on that topic and was definitely copping for him to step down, even though I didn't say it explicitly on my on like any of my media. But yeah, him stepping down was great, and him and that old man being bullied to be stepped down, to step down was also great, as well. And from my understanding, you do not believe that's the case.
So I'd say in hindsight, this has been the best possible case scenario. And has definitely gone better than I would have expected it to. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think the last time that an incumbent nominated candidate stepped down, like during the general election, pretty much, was like World War II, somewhere around then. It's a pretty unprecedented thing to happen in politics. And while Biden's approval rating and polling was pretty weak, I didn't think that was going to have as massive an effect on the total outcome of the election as a lot of people seem to have consigned it to. Like, a lot of people were dooming, like, Biden could not win. Like, Trump had this in the bag. He was going to win. And I continuously tried to be that positive voice of, hey, Hillary was also projected to win by a landslide in most projections in 2015 to 2016 as well. I don't know if it's 100% accurate to say the polling is going to decide the outcome of the election, especially when Biden was elected by people that aren't really loud about their support for him. You know, it was just a lot of normies elected Biden, the people who just want to return to normalcy of sorts. And that kind of tied into the heavily biased, it feels, media coverage of Biden. And if you want an example, I can give a couple, because that is a pretty bold claim. The coverage of him ranged from outright hostile to neglectful of his accomplishments. Now, I don't think that Biden needs to like get glazed or anything like that. It's just that for a good 6 or so years now, I've been doing political stuff and I've been deep diving into the issues that are very popular in this country. And a lot of these issues have been acknowledged by Biden. And I spent years complaining about those issues. So it just feels fair to me that after years of covering and complaining about how huge these problems are, that Biden, addressing them at the very least should be given attention. So his waves of student loan debt forgiveness, the PACT Act with benefits for veterans. My mind's a little scrambled right now, but, it come up with more, obviously. He's done a whole lot for the economy and job growth, the union stuff, the climate change stuff. I feel like these are all things that Biden should get credit for, because it's not a matter of telling your audience to sort of bite the turd sandwich and vote blue no matter who. In that case, it's also reminding them that that blue vote actually achieved something back in 2020. Like, we got something with that. And so from my perspective then, a lot of the Dem voter base, and even a large part of the Democratic Party, and I think what really sealed the deal was Obama calling for Biden to step down. He's kind of the voice of the Democratic Party. That, I think, really brought it all together, and I feel like Biden should get credit as well for stepping down after saying, he wouldn't. He relinquished that power because it seemed like it was best. I don't know. I feel like he still, even now, doesn't get enough credit. But on the other hand, I'm very happy with how things are gone. I certainly don't lament the situation. And that's kind of where I sit on it now. I'm fully on the Kamala train. I feel like now a lot of my pro-Biden coverage kind of, it's also the Biden-Kamala administration. So I feel it also serves to remind people of what Kamala has been a part of for the last 4 years.
Okay. I see. So let me start here, okay? Hindsight is not going to be needed for this conversation. We don't need hindsight. None of my arguments are going to be based off of hindsight whatsoever. I want to talk about things that we knew contemporaneously as it was happening, from the 27th debate to him to like a Sunday a couple of weeks ago, him dropping out. Right. Mm-hmm. So even though, yeah, we can say hindsight here, but that's not really what anybody was talking about. Right. And when you were making your comments, that was not, hindsight was not needed there. Right. So the hindsight wasn't possible. Right. Because we were living in the moment. We exist in the context of all that came before us, but not all that came after us, though. So hindsight isn't needed here. So you said that normies elected Biden, and I absolutely believe that's true. People who vote for Biden, those normal Democrats in general, are less online than conservatives are. Yeah, I completely understand that, and I get that. I remember after Biden, I remember Biden's inauguration had less views, both like afterwards and during live views, like that stream, than Donald Trump did in his farewell speech, and even the speech that he did like after Biden's inauguration speech. And there are people under there in the comment section like, oh, there's no way he could actually win. Look how little views he gets on YouTube. Obviously, no one would vote for this guy. No, he has no ground support at all. Obviously, all those people are way more offline and older. That's Biden supporters, but conservatives have become wildly more online in recent years in the age of Trump. So I get that. The problem was this started with normie Biden voter Democrats. This didn't start with elected officials. That's where the kindling for this fire to grow happened. You said it was biased media coverage. I would say I wouldn't say the media coverage was super biased, really. I've heard you talk about how the media coverage was biased against Biden throughout his presidency, and I just personally don't think so. I saw you bring up on stream what was it? It was something specific about him. You were talking to your editor and you pulled up an article. It was about him joining TikTok, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, I remember
different outlets. Yeah.
Yeah. So not only did different outlets say different things, but also, I mean, but also I remember that if you look up Biden joining TikTok, most of the articles that come up first were not negative at all. Actually, you kind of just picked out one of the ones that were negative.
The first article that came up.
Oh, for me, when maybe our timelines are just different. When I typed it in, that was not the first one that came up. But also in the moment, I remember reading articles about it, and most of them were not negative. It was just like Biden joins TikTok. Look at this old man on TikTok, right?
Yeah, to be fair, it could be that there's some personification. I don't know how that word works for TikTok, or not TikTok, Google. But I just looked it up again, and the same happens. So I'll just post my results there.
Sure, I mean,
when I look up Biden joins TikTok, I just get the top result there. So that's, to be fair, a little bit of my own bias of what comes up first. It seems like this is probably the most high traffic article from what I can tell. But yeah, it's just been throughout his presidency. It seems like I think Trump established a very burning 24-hour news cycle, right? Like, there's always something going on when Trump's president that the news media could focus on. And once Trump left office and Biden took office and the 2020 election ended, I think I can pretty easily source this one. Every media outlet, independent, mainstream, left, right, all took a massive hit on their revenue, viewership, click-through rate, everything. Biden just doesn't bring out a desire to engage with news media that 4 years of Trump did, and this sent out, I imagine, some alarm bells at some of these institutions, because I don't know, I don't know how a business sees that and doesn't think, we should do something about this. I know that CNN, I think, is under new management now, and they started appealing more to a conservative audience. But I want to bring up some of the reasoning that I have here. I want to substantiate it because I don't want it to just be coming out of my ass.
But one moment before you go on, because it sounds like you're bringing up a conspiracy about, and tell me if I'm wrong. It sounds like you're bringing up a conspiracy about media figures were getting a lot of money because every word that came out of Trump's mouth, whether it be legible or not, drew clicks, but Biden didn't, and so they had to do something to be able to get more clicks. So and negative media pays. So they started covering Biden negatively because they got more money out of it, even though he didn't deserve it. Is that basically what you're saying?
I think it's sort of a journalist's responsibility, in a way, to frame a story, depending on their bias when they're hired by a certain outlet, right? So, for example, a journalist may know a story is a certain thing, like beyond a reasonable doubt, but still has to report it a certain way for ethical reasons or for reasons that have to do with like their own biases, right? And so take, for example, when Trump had the assassination attempt. I think most people in the crowd, including the journalists who were there taking the photos, who were writing up the articles, I think they knew that Trump had an attempted assassination on him, that there was a shot that rang out from somewhere and it hit him, and that he was on the ground, or at least that it was taken at him. But instead, the articles were framed as, on the initial headlines, as Trump collapses at rally after gunshots are heard, because they don't want to say something super definitive. Even if they knew it was there, they're waiting for information to come out and for things to be official. People framed that as bias, but that is just a changing of the framing of the event, because that is necessary for the news agency to not end up reporting something false. They play it more careful than maybe is necessary, but I'd say it's a good way to go about things. In the same way, I think many journalists may be colored by other biases, especially those having to do with what's going to get clicks, right? So Biden joins TikTok, for example, could be framed as like, we're in the midst of that whole ban TikTok scandal at the time. That would be something to bring up, right? We would frame Biden joining TikTok as something a little more negative. People aren't super happy about Biden because they see him as old. How much that has to do with the media, it's really hammering home every gaffe and mistake and misspeak he makes is up to you. But from the perspective of the media, they can frame this as excitement that Kamala has joined TikTok, as there is that, or disappointment as Biden has joined TikTok, because there is that. Neither of these articles are lies. There's no conspiracy here. There's no lies here. This is just personal bias on the part of either the writers of these articles or just a desire to write an article with a title that is going to appeal to the most people. It's why it's so important to read past headlines, because, you know, the headlines are obviously meant to get your click, but the text of the article, if it's from a, you know, BBC, AP News, anything that's trustworthy, it's going to actually tell you the truth. You're not going to get like conspiracized to. But there's also the choice of what is covered, how frequently it's covered, how prominently it's featured. These are all small factors that I don't think mean conspiracy, but I do think they can lead to a pretty strong bias in a online political community on a smaller scale, and certainly on a larger scale, a change in pre-election polling. I'm sorry if I rambled a lot there, by the way. You can stop me if I do that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I get that media has biases. Yeah, totally. But I don't know. It just seemed like you were bringing up the fact that the media properties took a hit, and Biden and negative coverage of Biden together, like meaning that they wanted to cover more negative stories about Biden to be able to boost their ratings.
Yeah, I mean, none of these things are a conspiracy, I feel. I think that if a news agency is used to a 24-hour news cycle that's very, very hot under Trump and during the election, and then things get really cold and low click rate, and I mean, I'm talking astronomically low compared to when Trump was in office, then I feel it's not unreasonable to think that these news media organizations would tailor their coverage of the president to try and match what was normalized by the previous administration. I think you'd agree that, like, news reporting of the president after Trump, it's different. Like, Trump changed that. Like, his presidency just morphed it. And I feel like they're trying to keep that up or re-emulate what the news cycle was like under Trump. But for Biden, it's gaffes and like misspeaks, because people are talking about it. It's not like it's a false story. It did happen. People are talking about it. While on the other hand, you could equally say that it would be valid to be covering, say, Biden's current I think right now Biden is actually doing something really based. Hold on, I wrote it down.
That prisoner exchange.
Well, yeah, the prisoner exchange. Kamala and Biden are like the biggest one ever, I think. Yeah.
Maybe.
Pretty big deal. Pretty big deal.
But basically what I'm getting is that sure, like I get it. What I'm saying is that we just don't have any proof that that's what's happening. I don't think that the media actually changed after Trump got into office. I don't think it changed much. I think it just it's the same thing with the conservatives. I don't think I don't think Trump changed the Republican Party or conservatives at large. I don't think he changed them. I just think he activated something that was already inside of them. Like the problem there was already a problem with our 24-hour news cycle. There's a reason why during the Obama administration, they actually made a genuine news story out of the fact that he was wearing a tan suit, even off of Fox News as well. Like, sure, yeah, I get it. The thing is just, I don't think like all of his gaffes and everything were really that big of a deal to the establishment, to the media, and even to elected officials before the debate. I just don't think that was the case because those topics about his age, his mental acuity, how long he'd be able to hold up mentally in office, his personal gaffes and all those things was something that was actually personally tamped down by the establishment, whether that be like the DNC, like the Democratic establishment, and also mainstream media itself. Both of those closed ranks around Biden very quickly after it was clear that there was coalescing around him with the more center of the party before Super Tuesday. I just don't think that happened very much. Now, after the debate, yes, because it was completely, it was not something that you could ignore. It wasn't something that you could ignore. And the fact that Congress people were literally asking him to step down as well, and a bunch of other things that were going on, you just couldn't ignore that story. It'd be journalistic malpractice to ignore that story. I mean, even his number one show, the show that we know that he wakes up every single morning and turns on, he wipes the sleepy out of his eyes and then turns on Morning Joe with his two actual unironic friends, Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski. He watches that like every single day, and even they were doing the breakup sort of, I love this guy, he's great, he's sharp as a tack, but like if he was a CEO and he gave that performance, I couldn't say that he should keep a job, right? I mean, it was the people, the actual Democratic base of the party. They were way more they were way more anti-Biden. They were way more critical of Biden, his age, his mental acuity, the whole age thing, than the mainstream media was, and the Democratic establishment was, because they actually just shut down that type of conversation on when it could have happened in 2020 and throughout his presidency all the way up into the debate.
Yeah, I think that during during the primary before the 2020 election and during 2020 itself, the original like Joe is old and he's sleepy and he can't keep a line of thought running, that talking point kind of initially started among Democrat primary voters, like lefties and stuff that were, supported Bernie, those that supported Warren, those that, basically like, Sleepy Joe. That moniker, all but that name, started during the primaries. And then once he was the nominee, Trump really popularized, Joe's sleepy. And that one famous image of him with the popped blood vessels in his eye, like, his brain is melting, started to really become a talking point. And people thought it would be his downfall, I remember, during the 2020 election. And it wasn't. Surprisingly enough, as the night went on, the mail-in ballots just brought him into the lead. And I feel like we're likely, I always felt like we're likely to see a repeat of that, if not even stronger, in this coming election, regardless of how negative the media coverage got. But it's felt like it's been a escalating amount of coverage of Biden's gaffes, right? And maybe they're
because
so
it was
frequent,
like, because they were so bad. They were so bad recently.
I mean,
and it was also notable. And it also played on the fact that everybody didn't want him to run again and they were tired of him already, and his age was already an issue back in 2020, and the fact that he didn't commit to not running a second term was already something that your average Democratic voter didn't like. Now, I will say one thing is that I will say that the idea of him being old and sleepy and all that, sorry, old and whatever, right? His age was a problem among Democratic voters. Yes, I wouldn't say that was like started by like the left or something. I don't even know if we can even factually prove that. What I can say is that it was a big enough problem that it was an issue in polling that the internal polling through his administration, external polling through third parties, and just talking to people generally, they were like, yeah, he's old. He's too old. Actually, he was too old in 2020, and he's too old this year in 2024. That's true, and just about everybody believed it. Bernie got the same thing. The problem was the reason why it helps. Well, Trump's involvement was sooner than that because almost everybody believed that Biden was going to be the one to go up against him anyways, no matter really what happened. There was a time when they thought it could have been Bernie, but like I would say like 60% of the primary, everybody was like, oh, it's going to be Joe versus Trump. And yeah, like people were worried about his age and it being like a problem. That was always the case. I think like 50% of the Democratic Party, while polled during 2020, said that age is an issue and he is too old. And the fact that he kind of, I wouldn't say, I won't go as far as say lie, but the fact that he kind of postured that he could step down by being like, oh, my presidency is to pass a torch, to leave that door open and then close it when he was like, I'm not passing there's like a lot of work I got to do. So like I can only use this torch, right? It's my torch, mine. Like obviously that rubs people the wrong way. They didn't want him to run because he was old. He ran and they voted for him because people thought that he was the best to beat Trump. But I don't think if that wasn't the case, I don't think people would have voted for him near as much.
Well, I think it's worth remembering as well. I don't know how frequent or how unanimous the agreement was that Kamala should be the one to take his place at the time. The most frequent suggestion I was hearing, funnily enough, was Michelle Obama. I think her potential polling was.
You mean this year or 2020?
High, so I get why. No, for this year.
Okay.
That's what people in my chat were saying. If Biden stepped down, then maybe Michelle Obama should take his place. And I was like, is she a politician? Like, I guess she could.
She didn't even want to be first lady. She does not want to be president.
Yeah, I don't know if she would want to. Like that. Why are you suggesting her? She suggested she's running? So I hadn't heard any suggestion. Well, I'd heard some, but like there was an implication that the party was going to find someone new, like a completely new name. So from my perspective, I didn't know it was going to end up being Kamala. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, if you watch my video, I'd say like the only person who could take his place and reasonably have a chance would be Kamala Harris. But the disagreement seems to be primarily sort of like a chicken or the egg kind of thing. You know what I mean? Where I do agree that there was always, and that's why I brought it up, there was always upsettedness among the DNC vote or the Democratic voter base and the DNC, I'm sure, the Democrat establishment of Biden's age. But I think it had less to do with Biden's ability to fulfill the job of the president, particularly within the DNC, and more a strategic thing. And I'll get to my reasoning there in a moment.
I have heard that. I completely disagree.
Yeah,
but yeah, you can make your point.
But you don't think that like Biden might be less useful, like as a kind of mouthpiece for the DNC long term than Kamala? Because I think it's kind of a reasonable choice from that position. Like, yeah, I think they would be smart.
No, it's not that I disagree that it's a position that you could hold and that could be logical. I disagree that like almost anybody was thinking about that when making this decision. That's just not what people were thinking about. They were like, when it comes to the politician,
the DNC, I think they were.
I don't think
voters.
So. No, I don't think. No, I don't believe that was a very big thing on their mind. No, because they got Obama. Like they already have Obama. It's fine. They're perfectly fine with Obama, right? Joe Biden is worth probably maybe even 3/5 Obama, but that might even be giving him a little bit too much stock. Actually, he's cool. But that was not going through their mind. Going through their mind was winning this election cycle, not having the top of the ticket drag us down. We want donations, and Joe Biden is not able to do any of this because his candidacy is dragging down everybody, and nobody really wants to vote for him, and it's causing a massive problem. That's what they were thinking. It's way more short term of we want to get through this election. And other than, I wonder about how many years Joe Biden, we could wheel out Joe Biden to give like 3 speeches for the next candidate in 4 years.
Yeah, so like I said before, it feels like sort of a chicken and the egg thing where I think there was always people upset over his age, but I feel as though it was a sort of escalating amount of attention given to it, which sort of fed into like, how many people are learning of the fact that Biden is having these gaffes due to the media. I mean, everyone. I don't think most people are seeing Biden in person. And so the escalating coverage, which is obviously, I feel, fed by escalating interest in that coverage as people get more upset at the idea that Biden is old. I feel like it was sort of a snowball effect, and that the critical mass point was the debate. When Biden did the debate, and like, I don't even know how much of the country was watching, and Biden just flubbed it, just absolutely crashed that car. That's when people, I think, realized, oh shit, this guy has a hard time with public speaking. He is not good at it, and his age is definitely catching up with him. And I think that's when the desire for Biden to step down really hit a fever pitch. And from there, it was sort of a slow escalation of we don't really know technically when the members of the Democratic Party decided that they wanted Biden to step down, because all we have is the leakers telling us that they wanted them to. But based on the way the leaks came out, it was sort of a trickle. And that could imply that maybe it was a slow, unanimous decision that was come to for Biden to step down. But it also
I believe
decided, and then just long pressure was put on him, right?
Oh no, this was completely, everybody wanted him to. Just about everybody wanted him to step down, except for like really big DNC loyalists, like Jamie Harrison, the chairman of the DNC. Just about everybody wanted him to step down. The problem is you have to stay in line. Like you don't want to cause any trouble. You don't want to get in trouble with the leadership, and you don't want to be seen as causing discord. There's a reason why Bernie Sanders did like the speech to ask everybody to officiate Hillary Clinton's nomination in 2016. Right? You want to come together, but no, absolutely. Just about everybody wanted him to step down before that. It's just that nobody could say anything because the pot was boiling over, but we could keep a lid on it. The problem is when the debate happened, it stopped from just spilling out the sides and slowly boiling over to a rolling boil that of scalding water that you couldn't possibly ignore. And so it was we try to live by jumping to a new raft, or we die with Biden, and that was it. And so that's what, like, it's this is incredible for people to come out and like publicly say that they want Biden to drop out, right? Like, and the fact that none of the Democratic leadership from the very beginning of when those talks happened, the fact that wasn't shut down before anybody even said anything said a lot about how everybody felt beforehand.
I'm curious how you feel about Bernie and AOC, because I remember they were getting a ton of flack because they had like kind of called out the calls for Biden to step down, and they'd been called like traitors or like shills to the DNC. I don't know if you saw that, but I was curious what your thoughts were on it. Like, because you implied that like everybody was unanimous, but there were some surprisingly well-liked progressives that were kind of against the Biden stepping down calls. And I don't think it's because they didn't want Biden to step down, much like I think this was a best-case scenario, but more so because Biden is not as bad as people tend to frame him as, I feel. And B, Biden at the time seemed to have 100% would be our candidate. And it felt like it was inevitably just throwing stones and weakening our inevitable candidate. I'm glad that's not what ended up happening. I'm glad that like the bullying followed through so hard that he was forced to step down, and now we're seeing a complete polar opposite reaction. I'm very happy to see that. I'm very happy with how things are going. But from at the time, it very much worried me that like the doomer mentality over the idea that Biden couldn't win and we were doomed had transformed into animosity for Biden. And maybe you would agree there, but I don't know if that was I think from some people it was an unhealthy mindset. I don't know if it was from you because it just seems like you were like, yeah, I mean, Biden should probably step down. It doesn't seem like his chances are strong. But there were definitely some people that were saying Genocide Joe must step down. He can't win against Trump. He is dooming the country. If he stays in the race, he is letting fascism win. And I don't think that's true. I feel like that was letting doomerism drive you towards aggression, you know?
Okay, two things. One, I completely agree with the framing that the wanting, like the fear about Donald Trump being able to moonwalk into the presidency and the animosity towards Biden was real and palpable. And I also agree that he absolutely deserved it. He should have stepped down to begin with, and we shouldn't have been in this position. It was his fault, and he deserved all the animosity that came his way. I'm glad not only did people throw rocks at him, they stabbed him. To quote an anonymous congressperson who spoke to the media, who gave a comment to the media anonymously, the beatings will continue. The beatings will continue. And I'm glad that they said that. I'm glad the beatings continued. 100%. I'm glad he turned around one day and said, "Et tu, Barack?" And he got him too, because it was absolutely needed. But I'll circle back around on that in just a moment. And I want to talk about Bernie and AOC, where I'm glad that they did what they did, because they're on the outskirts of the party, and you can't be seen, and you don't. It would give illegitimacy to the movement to have Biden step down if they were the ones to really be on the front lines calling this, make him step down, because they don't want to be seen as like causing discord. The fact that it was coming from the inside circle of the Democratic Party, people really in the establishment, right? Those people asking him to step down was obviously way better. But both of them didn't want him to step down. AOC came out and said specifically the reason was because she heard inklings of people wanting to sidestep Harris, which would be a detriment, which would be a problem, because she was the only one who could inherit all the money, right? And so that it wasn't because she thought Joe Biden would be the best person, just generally, like if we lived in a perfect world, it was because we're 3 months from the election and we don't know if there's going to be any unity. We already have a guy in, we could just throw our weight behind him and then just like Hail Mary and hope for the best. And I believe that was the same with Bernie. And he said about as much, where every single time he went out to talk about him, he's like, yeah, he's old and it's like a real problem, but he's all we got. I'm glad that they didn't. I think they played their cards perfectly, and I wouldn't have had them change their mind at all. But that doesn't mean I think that behind the scenes, they're very happy that he stepped down and they didn't want him to run again, just like basically every single Democrat, or at least a large plurality of Democrats as well. But on the animosity towards Biden, he absolutely deserved it. What should have happened is in 2020, he should have realized that his age was a massive problem. And him 4 years from now, he has no clue where he will be as an 81-year-old man. And he should have groomed Harris to be able to be a replacement for him to do better than Obama did when he went in office, and there was literally no talent left to be able to take up the mantle to run against Donald Trump, who had money, who had resources, who had a name. He had no heir. So he should have done better than Obama and had an heir ready to go, who he trained up from his 50 years of experience in office or whatever, that he trained up, that he gave a more public profile to help out more, to be able to run afterwards, so he can like step down, not run for re-election, and then thrown out the person who was already fully prepared with money and everything and connections, all of it, to go to be Donald Trump. Like after that, and it would have been way better than it is now. It worked out well, but that's not because of anything Joe Biden did right. It's just, we're lucky that Joe Biden didn't fuck up worse than he actually did. So yes, he absolutely deserved animosity. People didn't want him to run originally. He did it, as he said himself in his for himself, that he was doing it for his own personal greed, because he thinks he deserved a second term, not because he thought it was the best thing to have a second term all the time. And now we can see that it not only was it not, that there were better options out there, and we can see that now with hindsight. But most people were on the same page that yeah, they didn't want him to run, and it was his fault. He deserves it. So, I'm glad he's in his valedictorian stage where they can look back and be like, oh, that Biden guy wasn't too bad. It's good for him. good, sure, but he deserved
Yeah,
it.
I mean,
Stab
I
him.
definitely see a lot of articles that are like, oh, Biden will be remembered as the greatest president in U.S. history and stuff. It's like,
Yep.
yeah, okay. But regardless, though, in regards to Biden training up Harris and relinquishing power to a better candidate, I feel like he's actually spent, I don't, for one, I don't think it was due to greed. I think a lot of it has to do with holding a Democratic administration. A lot of Biden's policies and motions he's put into place actually require a 10-year timeline. A big one is the climate change policy. We have to hold 3 terms of Democrat presidency for that not to get axed down by a Republican administration. And if we can hold that, that's huge. By 2030,
Yeah, that would have
I think
been
it's going
that would have been perfect
but,
if he ran once and then had his heir run twice.
Sure, but Biden has been building up Harris as and grooming her to be the next VP. In fact, if you go to the WhiteHouse.gov record, the record, which is like their whole list of accomplishments, it's always been the Biden-Harris record. The like all their photos and stuff on the site are like them together. It's always kind of highlighted both of them. I feel the plan from the start, if not for this election, obviously it wasn't for this election, but the plan from the start, at least from Biden's administration's perspective and the way things are framed, does seem that Harris is getting this attention for a reason. I think she was always supposed to be his successor.
Maybe after a second term, but that's not what we were talking about. They didn't want him to run for a second term. He did, but really nobody else did. And
well, was that true during the was that true during the primary?
Yes.
How was the vote during the primary? I guess there wasn't really much of a primary. It was a sham. You know.
Oh, you mean this? Oh, you meant this election cycle? Oh, I was talking about even back in 2020. Yes, there was absolutely people didn't really want him to run for a second term. Those were questions on like I think every single debate. They asked Bernie and Biden, "You guys are old. Will you commit to running for only one term and having somebody else take up the mantle?" And both of them had to ask those questions. He was asked that on BET. He was asked that on the debate stage. He was asked that almost every single time he had an article. Almost every single time he had an interview, had to talk about this. They were like, you're really old. People keep telling us you're old. And in polling, everybody was like, yeah, this dude's really old. And like, sure, he's cool, but like, we don't really want him to run a second term. Like, it'd be great if he just, would not. And I do think that he was helping Harris. Absolutely. I'm not saying that he didn't. Like, I read an article not too long ago saying that he absolutely wanted Harris to be in the situation room every time he made an important decision. I get that. I know that. What I'm talking about is more her public persona. Like, he basically gave her fix immigration as like her like day one goal, and then when that didn't go over well, she like basically disappeared, and all the work happened in private, and it really took a big hit to her approval rating when I think she could have been in a much better spot if he did more work publicly to help her in that way. But go ahead.
I don't necessarily disagree there. I think that a lot of I feel like Biden's still gotten a really unfair rap of things. A lot of the attention, it feels, has been either dry, low traffic articles going over like genuinely monumental accomplishments that he's made policy-wise, or almost tabloid tier feeling articles about his gaffes. And I get that they're important and people care about these gaffes, and they could be signs of a serious problem. At least a lot of people think they could be. But it felt so vapid, and I couldn't stop myself from calling it out when like I've just read an article about Biden doing some like game-changing climate change policy with the coal industry, and meanwhile everyone's talking about him misspeaking. It felt so hollow, and I don't think that's actually an argument against you so much, because we're really talking about electability here, and the American people have been, to some extent, I guess, made prone to decide that debate performance and TV appearances and speaking skill amount to a good president, when Biden has been a pretty damn good president from a policy position too. But then again, Kamala taking his place, she's not going to be any worse. She will likely be far better. So I'm once again not complaining much. I like how things have turned out. I'm really not upset with things. And I'm kind of happy that Biden is, as you said, in his valedictorian phase, where he gets to kind of like soak up the credit, and there's less like stakes for people to dunk on him. But as for the pressure and whether it was good to stab him in the back, it's easy to say it was, since he did step down and he did eventually follow through on his word. But if he hadn't, I'm no.
It would have been his fault.
And I like to say it would have been. I suppose
Yes.
you could say that. Yeah, that's a,
Yes.
I think that's a difference of opinion. I don't know if we have that difference of opinion, but I think that's something for people on an individual level to decide. Is it Biden's fault if he had ran anyway and he hadn't stepped down?
Yes.
And all of the media coverage dunked him. I would agree.
Yes,
I would agree
absolutely.
it would be Biden's fault. If this was the possibility that was the alternative, I would say, yeah, it would be his fault.
It was his fault for running in the first place when he shouldn't have. It was his fault for not paying attention to how bad that he was polling worse than he was polling worse than any president has in the history of presidential polling. He should have known when Donald Trump was at the highest point he ever had. He ever had been than a Republican has been, I think, in the history of presidential polling as well, and also at his peak even before the debate. And even like wiped out his funding lead, which is what him and his campaign staked their almost the entire election on. It was his fault for not running a single poll in battleground states for 2 months before he stepped down, and that was the big reason for why he actually stepped down. You said earlier that it was Obama that actually did it. Actually, it was the cavalcade of governors and lieutenant governors and senators and House members and staffers. After his campaign sprung a leak, Biden was running a really tight ship before the debate, and then everything sprung a leak. Everybody was sneaking off to tell a politician some salacious story about what's going on inside of the campaign, because obviously there was a real, genuine problem that people wanted to see addressed. And yeah, it absolutely would have been. And the reason why I'm glad they did that is because it's the same reasoning for why we want a general strike and not just a normal strike. If just like a couple people strike, sure, I mean, like maybe you'll get something, but more likely than not, you'll get union busted and you'll get obliterated. But if everybody strikes, like obviously there's almost nothing that like the ruling class can really do about it. It's the same way when it comes to Biden. If one congressperson comes out, and one progressive congressperson, even when it comes to the general populace, right, with all the discontent that he's had, that he just simply ignored throughout the entire election process, even with all of that wasn't enough to get him to step down, as he was polling the worst, as he was polling worse than any president has in presidential polling history. It needed to be so bad that it was impossible for him to run again. They needed to beat him. The beatings needed to continue. They needed to stab him so bad that the bleeding had become terminal, and it was impossible for him to continue his campaign because he wasn't listening. He didn't listen to the people. He didn't, which is where it actually started. He tried to run on the whole, like, oh, it was the elites that are doing this, the bedwetters and the chattering class, when it was actually the actual voters. And he only started caring when the media and the Democratic establishment started caring and the donors started caring. That's when it became a problem, not when your average person cared. He didn't give a shit then because he had the same opinion that you did, that, yeah, they're angry, but kind of fuck them and they'll come home. They'll come home. Fuck them, they'll come home. I know they, like, what are you gonna vote for Trump, huh? You gonna vote for Trump? You'll come home, won't you? Of course you will, dumbass. And so, like, if that was the position, people were like, I kind of don't want to vote for this guy. And yeah, they probably would have not voted for him. I still believe, like, as I said in the tweet, he had 0 pathways to victory after the debate. 0. He had a 0% chance of maintaining the presidency. I would say 100% 0, as Trump was polling better than he has ever polled, and polling better than almost any Republican had polled in the modern era against Biden. I think I don't want to be, and I'll leave it at this because I've been yapping for a bit, and I don't want to be mean. Okay, just know I'm not mean when I say this. I say this with so much love in my heart, and if you were here in real life, I would hold your hand while I say this. But I believe in some of. Thank you. In some of your coverage, I believe you were genuinely delusional when it comes to your analysis of how strong Donald Trump is right now. He is the strongest he has ever been. Stronger than 2016, stronger than 2020. He's the strongest he has ever been. Polling better than he ever had. And he was making moves in states that people didn't even think possible. Biden was heading towards a generational loss that would be written about in the history books for as long as this country was around.
People say that. I will stand firmly on the hill that if Biden had stayed in the race and people had chosen not to vote for him instead of Trump, or just to not vote at all, it would be their fault and not Biden's if Trump won. That's just sort of like I will die on that hill. That's sort of a matter of opinion, I suppose. But as far as like being delusional over Trump's strength, I don't know. I don't really know how you could say that Trump has gotten stronger than ever. Because did Trump like reach a peak of strength in 2016 and then become weaker in 2020? Because he got more votes in 2020, but he also gained less votes more for the Republicans than than Biden did for Hillary in 2020 for the Democrats. So it's hard to say that Trump really got all that much stronger. And we're now looking at post Roe v. Wade, post J6, which I don't know how much Americans really care about, but I'd say it probably worried a fair few Democrat voters into voting blue no matter who. I don't know. I feel like Trump and the Republicans being so mask off, particularly about like reproductive health stuff, has really fucked them. I think it's fucked them really bad now with Kamala. Like, I think they're done. Like, they are done this election. Don't get complacent. You better vote, guys. But I think they're really done now, but I think they were done before. I think what sealed the deal for them, regardless of Biden's age, was the reproductive rights stuff. But that's a matter of... Yeah, sorry.
No, that's basically what I'm talking about. No, okay, so what I mean when Donald Trump is the strongest he had ever been, I'm not sure, you don't quote polling very much, but I also found a problem with your analysis of polling as well and the ideas of it. For one, you said that like earlier you said that Clinton was projected to win in a landslide. No, she was not. Actually, she wasn't projected to win in a landslide at all. She was projected to win, yeah, but Donald Trump still had like a 20 or 30% chance to win in almost every single almost every single forecast. And forecasts are different than polling, because every single model weighs things differently. And even the polling didn't say that she was on track for a landslide victory against Donald Trump either. There are a lot of red warning signs, like her polling in Virginia and her polling in the Rust Belt. Both of those places showed real serious problems, as well as Trump gaining in the polls, closing in towards the end of the election. Like, no, I wouldn't say that polling said that she was going to landslide Trump at all. It actually said that it was going to be a pretty close race, closer than a lot of people wanted to admit. That I might wait. Sorry, people are effing.
Oh God, it might have just been a temp OBS dropout. That happens sometimes.
Wait, are we back, chat?
Your internet's good. It did not drop out, so it was probably just OBS or YouTube.
It might be. Although they're still effing though. Twitch is up. We back? Hello?
Tell them to refresh.
Marco? Yeah, try and refresh everyone. They're still effing.
Yeah, your internet's spotless. You haven't had like even a click or a robot moment, so I don't think it's your internet.
Yeah, I didn't drop a single frame. I have no clue what happened. We're back? Okay. Yeah, so he wasn't projected to lose in a landslide in 2016. Absolutely not. And it was way closer to him being projected to win worse, to lose worse in 2020, but that data actually happened at the end. But it was still a relatively close election, if I'm going to be honest with you, way closer than a lot of people wanted it to be, way closer than I thought it would be. Trump overperforms his polling almost every single time. Like, you also said that Biden overperformed his polling in 2020. Did you? Like, do you remember saying that?
On my part, yeah. That was a complete mistake on my part.
Incredibly wrong. Yeah, they're very, very not correct. He massively underperformed his polling, actually. But yeah, you know that.
What I'm curious about in regards to Biden and his popularity is Biden's age having always been a problem. Why do you think he ended up pulling the win from the nomination in 2020?
Oh, it's the same thing that killed him this election cycle, electability. Your average person became. I remember this was said by a talking head. I think it was on MSNBC, that people wanted to become pundits instead of voters, and everybody started to do like armchair punditry about who they believe was best situated to win the election. Remember what everybody said was their number one thing that they were looking for a candidate that, in 2020? Beat Donald Trump. Yes. So that's why he won, because he had connections to Obama, who's popular, because he had connections in general, because he's ran campaigns before, because he was a seasoned congressperson, because he had a relatively good approval rating, because he seemed more centristy and more appealing to the middle, and it seemed like he could beat Donald Trump. That's why he won. But what I think people get wrong is that he didn't win because he's Biden. He won in spite of being Biden. I don't think people changed very much. The problem was his age was a problem before, but it got overshadowed by his electability. But now, since his age has jeopardized his electability, they dumped him. Joe Biden didn't have. There aren't many Biden bros. There aren't many people who are Biden fans. They were anti-Trump voters, and they didn't want Donald Trump to win again. And Joe Biden was the vehicle to get that done. That's why he suffered such a big polling loss. That's why his polling is so bad, because he never had a real fan base. What he had was being propped up because people wanted to beat Trump. And once it seemed like that wouldn't happen, he was bitten by the same horse he rode in on, and then his polling was went into free fall. Because once again, it wasn't because they like Biden, it's because they didn't like Trump. That was always said. There was a reason why when you ask people, when polls came out and they asked people, why are you voting for Joe Biden? 37% said that they didn't want Trump. 37% said they like Joe Biden. 63% said because they didn't want Trump to win. That's incredibly, wildly, astronomically low. And so he was just being dragged down by the same thing that he rode into office on. And that's why he was unsustainable, because he has no fan base. He has no supporters. They're just anti-Trump people, something that anybody else running who's somewhat competent could gain. And also people who actually want to vote for that person. And Biden isn't that person. He never was. He never will be.
Yeah, I just find it interesting because, like, Biden was just as, maybe not, he literally wasn't just as old, to be clear, but, you know, he was just as aged back then. He was stuttering, like, a lot, and, you know, even then he was having, like, the eyeball bleeds and shit.
It was not.
And so bad. It's I feel like I got the impression his age was a worse problem then, but that might just be a perception thing. What really stood out to me, and there's a reason I bring it up, is his the fucking blood vessel in his eye popping during a speech or some sort of meeting. I forget what it was, but it was like the
it was on the debate stage. Like, yeah, it was on the problem is
melting. Oh yeah.
The problem is that's way more excusable than we beat Medicare.
I don't know if you could hear that, but the Blue Angels are doing a air show above Seattle right now, and they just flew over my house and like F-16 or something.
Actually, we didn't. It was perfect. Noise canceling.
Oh, okay. Cool. I'll send you a video I took yesterday when they flew over later after the debate, because it's actually pretty cool. They were flying in a tight formation over my backyard. It was so neat.
They're doing tricks on it.
Yeah, if they see you in your backyard, by the way, they see out their cockpit when people are outside, and they'll fly over areas that have a lot of people outside. So definitely wave at them, and they'll fly over a couple times. But back to the topic. I actually, could you jog my memory? I'm sorry, I got distracted by the jet.
We were talking about how he didn't have an actual voter base, and he was older now than he was before, and we beat Medicare was way worse than the blood vessel or any other stuttering that he did.
Yeah, it just feels as though Biden getting nominated on electability and then following through with a really strong presidency. And I think it would be difficult to say that his presidency, policy-wise, at least domestically, wasn't strong. I would argue that he's had various flaws on a foreign policy level, but domestic policy-wise, I feel like he's just been like going down the checklist of things that like the American people want. And
that's true, but he couldn't argue that because he's so old, and also inflation up.
Mm-hmm. Like, you couldn't argue that because he's so old is so real, though.
Yeah, and also and also inflation up. Like You know,
Yeah.
remember,
But
it's the
like I
economy,
said,
stupid. People think the economy's bad. They don't like the president.
well,
You know,
and
sorry.
I think inflation and well, yeah, inflation up is what people will repeat, but yeah, I mean, inflation I don't think the inflation rate is really rising anymore, is it? Where's it at right now? Has there
It's
been a
about
recent change?
it's about at 2%. The problem is prices are still high and inflation up, and
Yeah.
inflation was up now.
Well, yeah, the problem is the prices being high, I don't think is directly caused by inflation still, right? Like, isn't it?
I mean, the
I think there's a bunch
prices,
of other factors playing into
yeah,
that. But
but when
regardless, people
inflation
are
goes
still
down,
going to blame it
like
on Biden,
companies,
so it doesn't really matter.
yeah, but when inflation
Yeah.
goes down, the prices don't usually go down too. They just stay the same.
Well, they're supposed to stabilize because people like stop buying as much of a thing and they start buying a cheaper variant, and so they have like the name brand prices start lowering their prices, and the cheaper things like the non-name brands always supposed to be a little cheaper, and people start buying that when prices go up, and things start leveling out even after inflation. But yeah, it takes a while for that to heal, and I guess the nightmare scenario, one that you were quite afraid of, and that's why you wanted Kamala take Biden's place, is that Trump might get elected and inherit a recovered or recovering economy from 4 years of Biden. I am curious to know. Also, I wanted to clarify because I wrote down some of the points just so I wouldn't lose any in like just the conversation.
Go ahead.
When it comes to the polling for Hillary versus Trump, there was definitely a lot of polling that showed it being pretty close, but the majority of forecasts, which obviously take a lot of things into account, including polling, showed that Hillary had a very strong chance of winning, and by a lot. And because of that, I think most people, and I think you'd pretty easily find that a lot of people who are politically involved to any degree back then, granted I was a teenager, so I'm kind of digging back into my childhood here, it really did feel as though Hillary was projected to win in a landslide, and like Trump was a meme candidate. And even to this day, when you look at a lot of the big polling sites and the election forecast sites that have locked in their 2016 November 8th polling and chance and their forecasting, a lot of them still show Hillary at a very embarrassingly high chance to win. And so I feel as though I've become worried that the American people have started to focus their attention on what matters in a presidential candidate and a good presidency more towards the team sports that the Republicans are so desperate to make politics about, rather than like, holy crap, you hear what Biden did? Yeah. You have student loans still? Oh, wait, I got less, I owe less in student loans now. Hell yeah. I feel like there should be a little more of that. Maybe I'm too forgiving. Maybe I need to develop a more harsh perspective on currently sitting politicians. But I feel that it's important to give people a positive side of what they're voting for, what they already voted for, presumably, right? Like most of my fans voted Biden, so I feel it's nice to remind them, hey, you know that 2020 blue vote you made? It did something. And I think I agree with most of what you said, but I do think we'll have to agree to disagree on the idea that if Biden had stayed in the race, that if he had lost and Trump had gotten elected because Democrat voters decided, I'm just not going to support Biden at all, I want to punish him for this, I would maintain that would be those voters' fault if Trump then won and they were then affected by those policies that Trump would instate, not Biden's. But I don't really have too strong of an opinion on it now, considering this is like we're essentially now arguing over like a fictional universe, like power scaling fictional characters, since it's not even the reality that we're in. But it's still fun. It's still a fun like political theory discussion and a test of like polling knowledge and stuff. I think you beat me out on the polling knowledge stuff. I think you've got that in the bag.
I just spent a lot of time going through the polling. That's what changed my mind about Biden staying in the race. I mean, just if you go back through polling from 2020, people just didn't want Biden to run again because he was old. They wanted him, and I remember this from a pundit on I was watching an MSNBC segment. They said he delivered us from Trump, but now he'll deliver us to Trump if he stays in the race. It was his fault because he wasn't blindsided. He knew this. He didn't care. He said, yeah, I know, but what are you going to do? Vote for Trump? I'm going to run again. I want to run again, kick rocks. And that's basically it. That was his fault because he knew that he was on track to lose the election. I'm once again, I'm not sure if you looked at any of the polling, but it was so bad. Like, I'm not exaggerating when I say he was the worst polling president in presidential polling history. Only first to Donald Trump, who actually has a fan base, and so he has a floor actually, which is higher than Biden's, and that's why he's polling better than Biden was and is. He just couldn't have won. It is not possible. It's not really even up for the debate, unfortunately, because it was so astronomically horrible. How bad his polling was. It just cannot be overstated. I genuinely, and I know it sounds crazy, it cannot be overstated how poorly it was. Joe Biden, so to illustrate, Joe Biden in 2020 won the independent vote by 10 points. He was losing it in the most reputable polls in the aggregate by between 10 to 15 points. Biden won the black vote by about 90%. He was getting between 50 and 60%. Again, he was losing the Hispanic vote. And some of the most reputable polls, he was losing the woman vote by a couple percentage points and the male vote by up to 15. He was polling so poorly that New York Democrats signaled that his campaign would need to start to spend money in New York to maintain the margins because it was possible that he could lose. They had to spend money in Virginia because the race has now become because Virginia had then become a toss-up state. He was having to fight in New Mexico and Minnesota, both places that he won by between 7 and 10 points. We were in a Trump +6 environment at the best. And so if you take 6 for Trump, just move it 6 points for Trump in every direction in every single state, it would be a generational loss that cannot be overstated. Donald Trump, and still to this very day, is the strongest that he has ever been. Riding off the backs of the DNC, the assassination attempt, the positive media coverage that he got about trying to become the unity candidate, the fact that all the Republicans have now lined up behind him and now he has the biggest approval rating amongst even Republicans that he has ever had. Right now, his approval rating is, I think, 2 times better than Biden's. And it's in some polls, they're even positive at some point. And your average person now believes that Donald Trump did a pretty good job as president, on top of the fact that I think it's now 15% less people believe that January 6th was even that bad. It's like Donald Trump is at his strongest point as Joe Biden is at his weakest. And it was very possible that we were looking at a map that you can't even imagine right now without understanding the polling. And that's why I changed my mind. After looking through even his most positive pollings, warning signs were flashing red, like wildly, literally generational loss that he was looking forward to. And yes, it would be his fault.
I definitely think that you have a point with the possibility for a generational loss, though I still lean more towards the idea of a pretty substantial win. I think that like I mentioned before, a lot of the things the Republicans have pulled even after Trump lost in 2020 have made them weaker. I think that the Democrat performance in the midterms was pretty strong, and I feel like the Democrat voter base has gotten to the point where it will yell and it will complain and it will attack its own. But more often than not, especially when it's Trump that we're up against, or the Trump party, the Trump Republican Party now, we kind of come out and we vote. Maybe I'm wrong. We can't really see into that timeline. The polling suggests that you would be right. But at the same time, I don't think the polling would have necessarily reflected the outcome of that election. It's possible that economics could have played a really big part in a Trump win. The fact that things are still so expensive. I know that some prices are dropping, but that still takes time. But I don't know. I still think that I think regardless of who our candidate was, we're going to get the W. But regardless, still, at the end of the day, I think we both agree. Glad that Kamala is here and doing well. But I think we still will have to agree to disagree on Biden having stepped down if he had lost in that timeline because people just decided not to support him out of a feeling of betrayal for not following through on handing the torch off to Kamala. I would still say that would be the voters' fault, not Biden's. But that's a matter of perspective, right?
I mean, I guess I just think it's wrong. Like when you have the option to do something better and you simply don't, that seems like it's your fault. Like you share. I mean, it's a lot of blame. Like he's not some nice old man. We're talking about whether or not he should have locked. He deserves to have his riding lawnmower stolen after he forgot to lock his shed at night. He's a public servant who knew that he was going to lose. Like very, very likely he would lose, or there's warning signs so bad that it would be impossible to ignore. It would be like incredible incompetence to ignore, and still decided to not care anyways. That's your fault.
It's a pretty strong statement to say he knew he was going to lose. He ran a whole campaign. He did raise, before Kamala, record numbers of donations, I think in New York, about 6 months out from the debate, if I recall correctly. So there was a good amount of excitement even within the Democratic base and even within the donor base. There was a pretty strong... here, I can bring it up. I can see if I can find it. It's probably going to take a sec. If you want, we can move on to the next point, or we can wait.
Oh, I mean,
everything's drowned out by Kamala Harris now. Never mind.
It's a lot harder to find that stuff. But what I mean is that, like, I can he got a lot of fundraising, but then they didn't expect Donald Trump to outraise him, and he did by like a big margin as well. Like, yes, there was excitement, nowhere near as much as excitement. There's always excitement for any Democrat. Like, there's always excitement anytime, but what proves that there was less excitement this time than last time was the fact that a much lower percentage of his donations this election cycle was coming from small dollar donors and were coming from much larger donors. It was 60-40 small dollar to large dollar donations for his 2020 campaign. This time it was completely reversed, where it was 60-40 for large dollar versus small dollar donations around the time when he was dropping out. He was losing support and people who wanted to vote for him among the populace. That's just factual. And he lost ground to Donald Trump when Donald Trump had never beat a Democrat in fundraising for for any election that he's ever run in.
Do you think that Biden was losing voters to Trump, or he was losing voters to not voting at all?
He was losing voters to the couch and third parties. So he was losing voters to RFK, and he was losing voters to for people who didn't want to vote. People would come out and want to vote for Democrats down ballot, but they'd be like, "Fuck Biden. I don't want to vote for him. I hate both of these guys. They're too old, and neither of them should be running. And I don't want this this rematch. I don't want to see them anymore. I don't want Joe Biden to run again. He's too old." And this is something we'd known since 2022. It's actually something we'd known since 2022. He just didn't care because once again he thought that they'd just come out anyway. So like, who cares? Until it was too bad to not care.
It's hard to predict the alt timeline because of other factors that have happened since as well. Like, if Biden was still in the race, how would he respond to Trump bringing J.D. Vance in as his like vice president? Would we get some like stuttering, like, apparently Trump got the guy who fucked a couch? Would we get that line out of Biden and everyone just laughs their asses off and things turn around? Does Trump like nuke his campaign, or do they have every one of their talking points ready? I think that there's a few other points that we could argue that are actually more to your favor as to why it's better that Kamala is going to take the torch from Biden. Because at the end of the day, I don't disagree this is the best case scenario. I think our disagreement lies solely in the realm of if Biden deserved the amount of shit that he got throughout his presidency. And it was strongly he did. I believe a bit of it.
Well, it's not just that, but it's also the fact that Biden should have stepped down and come contemporaneously we knew he should have stepped down. This isn't something that we need hindsight to be able to understand. It was something we understood in the moment, which is what made your commentary about how it's wrong for people to come out against Biden incorrect, even in the time. That's why I started by saying we don't need hindsight here. We would have known, we knew beforehand that he should have gone a different direction, yet he decided not to. So our disagreements are on both those fronts. It was wrong of you to say that people should stop criticizing Biden, because what they should have done was stab him to death, which is thankfully what happened.
I don't think I said people should stop criticizing Biden. I think I said people should give Biden a more fair shake. So I feel like I'm being a little misrepresented there, but not like dishonestly. Just sort of like,
what I mean is less of stop criticizing, and more of like the criticism that he's getting is detrimental to the campaign, which is putting him in a worse position to win, because you didn't think that he was actually going to step down. So it was the inevitable. He's not going to step down. We know he's not going to step down. So stop trying to get him to step down, because you're making everything worse.
Yeah, that is a perspective I agreed with at the time. Yes, I thought that we were throwing stones at our to-be candidate. He would be the guy that would be going up against Trump, and that there was no chance of him stepping down. That is something that I was wrong about, and I feel like that's the thing that kind of like makes the entire thing kind of silly. But yeah, I mean, I still maintain that, but I don't really think it's not really much of a thing. It's just kind of, I think that Biden probably deserved more credit. I feel like his policy achievements didn't get a lot of attention. I don't know if you covered a lot of, okay, that's two of them. I don't know if you covered a lot of, sorry, Jet's going over. I don't know if you covered a lot of Biden's achievements when he's been in office over the last few years, but I feel like it's gotten a surprising lack of coverage. And I'm curious if you agree. So a good example would be, I believe he capped insulin for seniors at $30 a vial. And this is something I've seen people like this has been something people have been asking for a while. It might be for everyone. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is it only for seniors?
No, it is a plan in 2025 for seniors prescriptions to be capped at $35 a bottle.
Yeah. That's pretty huge. It's not everybody,
and got
but it's
coverage.
Pretty huge.
People know, but he's old and inflation up.
Well, I wouldn't say people know. I mean, how many people do you think really know that Biden is capping insulin for seniors by 2025? How many people? I think most people. That by 2030, the coal industry is supposed to be basically done, and that's 80% of our carbon footprint per year, and only 20% of our power output.
Well, that's a problem, because you're like, oh, he should get more credit from that, but also climate change is like a 5th or 7th or 8th tier care for people.
That's fair. That's fair to be. I don't know. I think I like to make my view of who we have as our inevitable person in power, and that's what I believe at the time. That's something I was definitely wrong about. As positive as possible, because I don't like it when people doomer, and I don't like it when the general opinion is sour. So I'll maintain that. But it was a good convo, and I definitely appreciate you reaching out as politely as you did, because I know that when my take on the Biden thing was a current thing everyone was discussing, that a lot of people were jumping down my throat, and then you just messaged me on Twitter like, hey, I saw your video, you want to talk about it? And I appreciated that a lot.
Yeah. There is some stuff that I still wanted to go over though. Like polling, your views on polling. I disagree with your views on polling, because it seemed like your view on polling is that every time you brought it up, because you never bring up polling too much in your analysis, which I think is a big problem. Because polling is pretty good. It's a pretty so polling is it's even less of a snapshot. Oh no, people are effing again. Is everything okay, chat? Marco?
Oh shit.
Marco? Oh no, I did drop a couple frames.
I bet it's YouTube. Oh,
no, I dropped a couple frames.
It's probably OBS.
Reload. But it's less about. It
wasn't your internet.
No, I did drop a couple frames, so it was me, but I don't know. It might not have been seen completely. Like polling is more of a.
Go
ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
It was about, I've been getting a thing with OBS lately when I stream where it's like once or twice every stream, there's like 3 seconds where OBS just drops the stream and it's just OBS. It wasn't my internet. Everything's fine on my end. And the chat still continues to move. So I know there's not been a disconnection. It's just OBS is weird lately. I think they need to do a patch update. So it's not your fault.
Okay. Yeah, I have no clue what's going on there. But yeah, polling is more of like a snapshot, a sketchy snapshot of what's going on. And so, yeah, it wasn't predictive. The problem was, and a lot of people said, I think you even said like, oh, 2-point deficit, 2-point deficit. The problem, like a 2-point deficit for Biden was a 6 to 8 point deficit from where he was. And he won by 4.5 points. Like that is a massive shift in polling when polling had gotten better. From even 2020. And now I would say that it might favor Trump these days a little bit more since they weigh white non-college educated voters more than they did previously. But like polling was so bad for Biden. It's not like it was horrible, right?
Do you think that the polling could have been affected significantly in a positive way before the election?
You mean like the polling got better? Like, do I believe the polling got better before the election?
Oh. No. Do you think it could have gotten better?
Oh, so that's what. So remember, I said that I actually thought that Biden shouldn't have stepped down originally, and so I was holding out that it could have gotten better. The problem is that it couldn't have. That's why I said he had no pathway to victory.
Okay.
Is that he had no pathway to gain more voters. It wasn't possible. Every lane, every like avenue that like almost every political scientist would imagine that he would be able to build up on to gain voters back and to gain in polling was something that he simply could not do. The problem is that a lot of people said that the race was static. The race wasn't moving that much. He didn't fall that much. It was because he didn't have that much further to fall. Joe Biden was already at his floor, a floor lower than we ever possibly imagined because his polling was so bad and people didn't want to vote for him so much. I like with independents, they are like, how do you get people to vote for you again? You try to offer them something. The problem was he has 100% name recognition and every single belief about him is already crystallized. So how in the world do you get more people to vote for you? The answer is you don't. Like he's already lost those people and they don't really want to come back home. And so now what, right? Like the answer is you lose. The answer is you lose. The moderate Republicans that he gained that helped push him over the edge in places like Arizona and Georgia, gone. The young voters, gone. The minority voters, gone. The women, even after Roe, gone. Trump was polling 46-53 with Biden in the lead with women. That's horrible. He should be winning women by between 10 and 12. The undecided voters were less likely to even say that they wanted to vote at all, and were going third party. He had no avenue to gain more voters, and he had no avenue for the election to get better. That's why come hell or high water for Trump, he didn't gain voters. Even after Trump's conviction, even after all those things, Biden didn't gain many voters. He was barely in the lead because he couldn't lead anymore. He can't do it anymore. He couldn't.
Here's where another one of our big disagreements might be. And then after this, I want to let you have like the final word and everything, because then I want to go outside and salute at these fighter jets before they finish up their exercises. I also have a video of it I want to send you if you want to show it on the stream as well. It shouldn't dox me. I think a big part of our core disagreement as well is that when I see this polling, my mind goes to this like thought process, like a fork in the road. Either this polling is accurate and we are so beyond fucked. And I don't mean electorally, I mean as a country, as a people, as a species, we are so fucked. If like after post-Roe, American female voters are becoming complacent about stopping Trump, that reality terrifies me.
Oh, but be careful. It's not about complacent about stopping Trump. It's about complacent about voting for Biden.
Sure. It's the same. It's the same. It's undeniable. It's the same, right? Because Trump is the party of annihilating Roe v. Wade.
Sure, but to us, normal voters want to vote for somebody, and and they didn't want to vote for Biden.
Yeah, but like I said, I'm not making an argument here. This is just like my mindset when I see those polling results, right? When I see that Trump is ahead, like 4 points in the polling, or 2 points in the polling, or 6 points in some cases in the polling ahead of Biden, or even in some cases ahead of Kamala, though her lead is growing continuously, and I'm happy to say it. It tells me that there is a possibility where a significant amount of Americans are that unwilling to mobilize for something as simple as a vote. And to be clear, it's not even just as simple as voting for Biden. You have to get up and vote to vote down ballot for a bunch of other positions and different laws and stuff that are on the ballot as well. And so,
yeah, they were voting down ballot. They just weren't voting for Biden.
Yeah, it's a scary idea to me that many Americans would let their spite lead them to voting Trump. And then there's the other reality where the polling isn't quite accurate. And it's not quite reflecting what the final result of the election is going to be. And that prior, the first path being a reality scares me. I am hoping that we see Kamala actually really overperform in the election. And I'm curious if you would want to do like a friendly like $5-10 bet or something on it, just to make it fun, on like election day, on if Kamala will overperform the polling, because I want to bet like $10 that she did, and I don't know, like, would you want to? I'm curious.
My dad always told me not to be a betting man. Oh, and also her name's pronounced Kamala.
Kamala? Oh, I always get it wrong. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Kama and then La.
Kamala. Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, I am not a bettor, but I don't believe that she's going to overperform the polling at the moment. The reason why Biden underperformed the polling was response bias. Democrats were more likely to, remember that was at the peak of COVID, Democrats were more likely to be at home and more likely to pick up the phone, and Republicans were way less energized. The problem is Republicans were way more energized and way more likely to pick up the phone, especially after Trump's assassination attempt to end the RNC. And you could be like, oh, well, there's the problem. Well, there's the polling bias. The problem is, if you're more likely to pick up the phone and talk to a pollster, you're more likely to go out on voting day. And Democrats just aren't. And that was shown in 2022, where they also just weren't. But in like people's like enthusiasm and favorability, Biden was even polling worse when it comes to Democrats on favorability than every other Democrat like ever, right? And we knew that that action, that like that fervor, that want to beat Trump, that want to get out there and vote was there. It just wasn't for Trump, because we saw after Kamala got into the race, now people opened their pockets, and she had the best fundraising day in the history of fundraising ever. But what we know is that in the time, Joe Biden's polling was astronomically terrible. It was generationally poor, and poor for a reason that we knew, and poor for a reason that your average American knew, but it was poor for a reason that not the mainstream media before the debate and the Biden campaign didn't want to accept until it was impossible to ignore. And that's how we got into the situation to begin with. And it's something that we could have seen, and it's something that we did foresee, but we just didn't do any action on until it became completely easy to ignore. And the shitting on Biden, I can agree, was not greatly helpful until there was a movement for it to happen. The machinations of Pelosi and Obama and congressional Democrats and everything going poorly for him after the debate was the time to strike at him, to make it impossible for him to be able to continue his reelection, because it was already impossible for him to win. He just needed to be shown that that's the case. And this level of discontent within the party was something that nobody knew, which made it impossible for him to continue on. But the polling showed it. The on the ground support showed it. The erosion of volunteers and fundraising showed it from small dollar donors and normal people. It's something that we all knew, and I believe that was something that was undeniable in the time. And I think that's why, and that's a big reason for why people got upset at you when you were like, oh, this sounds like a Trump, this sounds like a pro-Trump argument, because it's not. It's a pro Democrat argument, and it was very good that he got kicked out because there's no possible way that he could win. And at that point, it was wrong. It's not even like a matter of disagreement. It was simply incorrect not to want to push him out at that moment. It was simply incorrect, unfortunately.
But that is the matter on which we disagree, I suppose. I mean, it's all good. I figure that we probably wouldn't reach a full agreement, considering that, like, Kamala has taken Biden's place and she is doing so well. So it's kind of what I expect.
Even if she was doing worse at the moment, I would absolutely say it was better because she has a chance. Biden had no chance because he had no ceiling anymore.
I feel like that's a good example of like where the bias. I want to finish up and let you have the final speak before I go. But I feel like that's a good example of where some of the bias is. I had also read an article that had described Biden's cap as where Kamala's floor is. And I see where you're coming from if you argue that's his cap. But I feel as though as we get closer to the election and things got more real, it's hard for me to imagine that Trump would gain a lead on Biden as we got closer to the election. Like, and things got really real. So I want to wrap things up now because I don't want to miss these jets. I'm also going to send a video of them to you now.
Sure. Yeah. I'll say Trump didn't need to gain a lead on Biden because already the lead he had was a generational lead for a Republican. The normal polls that people were looking at were generic. Were general election polls based on who you would vote for. The fact that a Democrat isn't winning in those polls is astronomically terrible, because that would mean that he would not win the popular vote. And remember, Hillary Clinton even won the popular vote and lost every single Rust Belt state. If you applied that loss to the election, and so Biden won by 4.5, and if you go with and if you say that Biden regained some points, so he was no longer like -4 and -3.5, he is now -2. That's a +4. That's a +4 to +4.5 for Trump, meaning that you would have to move every single state 4 points. That way would mean that Virginia would be like 3. He would win Virginia by like 3 or 5 points. It's possible that he would lose New Hampshire. Possible that he would lose Minnesota. He would lose every Rust Belt state. He would lose Nevada. All of those places were just up for grabs, and the problem is those shouldn't be places that Democrats shouldn't be able to look back on. So it's the problem is he needed to go, and I don't like to say Biden dead enders, but continuing on with Biden was a dead end operation. That was a death march for the Democrats and our country into absolute oblivion. And the fact that people weren't accepting that is a big reason for why a lot of people got upset, and they weren't wrong. And now we can say that in hindsight, but we don't need hindsight to understand that it was wrong in the time if you looked at all the data. And the only way you can come to that conclusion, in my opinion, is if you are incorrect about what's going into this election or why people were feeling what they were, or you were or you were slightly ignorant about how the election was actually going, which is, I feel like your opinion was based on vibes, like, oh, I mean, like Roe's still around, and like January 6th, and Trump's still Trump, and yeah, but Biden's still Biden, and so that's basically my point. But thanks for coming on. Thanks for talking.
Yeah, I guess my overall just final point was that I think Biden did a pretty good job, and he beat Trump once, and I think he had a pretty good chance, and I hope we're still cool. But yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. I hope everybody enjoyed our convo. Feel free to show the video of the jets flying over. It shouldn't dox me or anything. I was like a couple blocks over, so it's not like it's the top of my house that's shown there or anything.
Perfect.
But yeah. With all that said, thank you so much for having me on. It was a fun convo. I'm curious if you would be down to have any future conversations about polling stuff, because I was curious what polling, where you get like your updated polling stuff, because generally I have to find it through like any article updating on big changes in the polling. I have to find like a link to where the polling was done, and it's not always like, here is a feed you can refresh. Do you know anything like that? Is there anything like that you use?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of Twitter accounts that do that. One, what's his name? There's this little gay boy who posts all the time. One is USA Polling. There's that one. I mean, Republicans Against Trump does that. Interactive Polls on Twitter. Their ad is IA Polls. I think that the guy, what's his name? Like Mitch, something along those lines. He helps run a system called Vote Hub US, where they take only the most accurate polls over the last couple of elections and put and plug them in to a database, and that's how they get their projections for what's happening. And they are big election nerds. So there's that, and you could just go straight to Real Clear Politics and 538, but they don't update with every single poll that comes out. But yeah, that's how I get my polls from, and then you can just click on the polls themselves, and I just read through all the crosstabs and everything, and that's how I figured out that over time, it's just not. He didn't have the possibility to win again, but those people do great with polling, and they also do interactive. They also have some. They also work with some systems, and they also. You can follow Nate Silver as well. G Morris, who runs 538 now as well. Those people love to dig into polling, and so
the problem is I don't use Twitter anymore. Although I will say
they'll have websites and stuff too.
A new high.
Yeah.
Kamala's at a new high. She's continuing to grow.
Yeah, Kamala's doing. Go ahead.
Like I still maintain because right now the polling's at 53% to 44%. I think Kamala, if the election happened today, would win.
Are you looking at a projection?
Win hard. The current projection of Kamala having a 44% chance to win. Yeah. Sorry, not polling projection. I misspeak because I'm in a rush to go out and see Jets now. I'm like a kid in class right before recess.
I get it. I mean, right now she's not at the spot she needs to be able to win the election when it comes to the aggregate. But I think she's slowly getting there. She's slowly getting to her floor. Some people are calling it a honeymoon phase. I don't believe any data showing that it's a honeymoon phase. This should be Trump's honeymoon phase because he's off the back of he's had a generational run this last couple of weeks, obliterating Biden, the living through the assassination attempt, the RNC picking his VP, positive news coverage for the first time in his entire political career. He is absolutely crushing it right now. But he still hit a ceiling. But Biden couldn't pick him. He had fallen and he couldn't get up, and nobody was coming after he pressed the life alert. Until Kamala decided to show up and scoop him and scrape him up off the floor and take his place. I mean, that's just how it is. And she's doing well, but she's not where she needs to be yet. But I think every projection shows that I think she will do well in time. And it was a great opportunity to replace him.
I actually have a final question for you because to me, Kamala not already dominating Trump in the polls is weird to me. Why isn't she already trouncing him pretty much across the board in every reasonable swing state for her to realistically win?
Well, a couple of reasons go into it. One is because the Biden administration's is just an albatross around her neck. Originally Biden putting her in charge of leading the campaigns, leading the administration's effort on how to deal with the Southern Triangle, I think is what it's called, countries where most of the migrants come from. It didn't lead to the migrant levels going down generally because it's a multi-decade project that she was on. The fact that got categorized as borders are, that is something that holds her down. The fact that people don't have a crystallized opinion of her holds her down in the polls as well. That's why you see it slowly gaining, but you don't see her like jumping up, because for that to happen, people would have to have a crystallized view of her already and already rate her favorably. The thing is that when people were asked about her, about 20 or 25% of people didn't even have an opinion of her. So you see people listening to her and taking time to figure her out, and people are like filtering themselves into I like her or I dislike her. Most people are going into I like her, and the percentage of people who don't have an opinion on her are going down. So that's holding her back from reaching her ceiling and dominating Trump at the moment. And also, once again, Donald Trump is at his absolute peak, his historic peak. He's coming off of a generational run in the last couple of weeks. He's the highest he's ever been. His approval rating is the lowest it's ever been ever. His job approval rating is the highest it's ever been for his presidency. People are thinking more positively about him than they ever have. Economic outlooks for people are relatively low, and the fact that Kamala Harris is still attached to the presidency, which is attached to people's poor feelings about the economy, is leading to her not reaching her maximum yet, and will be an albatross around her neck for the entirety of the campaign. But it's about whether or not she can distance herself from the Biden administration's perceived losses and connect herself to the administration's wins, and dodge conservative attacks enough, and rebrand herself again in the minds of the populace to be able to win the election. And that's what it's based off of. And that's why she hasn't seen like this incredible boom yet. It's good that people don't have a crystallized view of her, because it would be negative, because she had a horrible approval rating, worse than Biden actually. But it's also bad at the moment because people need to form a view of her. But it's going well, and she has the time to do it, and now she has the money and resources to do that as well, because she inherits Biden's ground game that allows her to get the vote out, and she's been doing very well when it comes to her speaking engagements at the moment. But we have to see if that lasts. This doesn't seem like a honeymoon period. I think she's slowly reaching her floor, but I think it's a healthy amount of growth that you would not see in a honeymoon period that we are seeing with Trump, and it's already dying down, which is why he reached his peak at 46 in high quality polls and 48 in the general aggregate, and is now creeping back downwards to where he should be at, which is 46-47%. But it just depends on Harris if she can convince enough undecideds and moderates and independents to hop back on the get coconut pilled. And so that's what's holding her down.
You really got shot and didn't manage to hold on to the hype from that for a month. God.
Oh yeah, people already forgot. They don't care, and it's the funniest thing in the world. You see conservatives like, they're trying to memory hold this. People already forgot. I'm trying to re-up this. Remember, he took a bullet for us. But what's great is actually some polling came out to say that, and I'll leave you with this. Some polling came out to show that after it, what people's views of the shooting were. And even though they thought of Trump more positively, they asked people what was the problem, like what led to the shooting. And obviously people picked the number one thing, which was the guy who shot him. But the number two thing right under that, do you know what that was? His own rhetoric. People believe that his own rhetoric led to him getting shot by, I think, an order of magnitude more than people thought that Democrats' rhetoric about him being a threat to democracy led to him getting shot. So that's a big reason. And also, he got grazed in the ear, and it doesn't even look like it. It doesn't even look like he has a problem. If he got shot, like, and he was in surgery right now still, or like he was in a wheelchair, like then people would do something. But he had a Band-Aid on for a day, and just kept it pushing. And so, yeah, like the normal Trump things that happen. It gets in the news, people talk about it for a sec, and it gets memory hold.
Yep. Worst case scenario would have been he got grazed like along the orbital bone, and it gave him a cool scar. It'd be so done. But yeah. In all seriousness, though, it's been a fantastic conversation. Thank you for having me on, and I hope we can talk again in the future, especially about like polling electoral stuff. And yeah, have a good one, man.
Sure. Take care, buddy. Have a good one.
See ya. Bye.
Okay, I think that went pretty all. I think that went pretty all right. What do you think, chat? Do you think I made my case? Did good? Good. Good. But yeah, like if you dig through the polling, there was just no possible way that Biden could win. And that's something that I want people to understand, is that Biden had no possible pathway to victory. He simply could not win. And it wasn't the media's fault, because people already believed that he shouldn't have run for office to begin with. And that's a completely different conversation about whether or not he deserved another term, or if he would be good for, or if it'd be a good thing for him to have another term. That's a completely different conversation about whether or not people believed that he should have another term and want to vote for him. And he just did not have the possibility to ever make it that far, because people were sick of him running in the first place and they didn't want him to run again. People feel lied to. And another big problem is that one of his main drivers for people wanting to vote for him over Donald Trump was something that took a massive hit after that debate as well, which is something that people don't talk about. I mean, I wanted to talk about this in the debate as well, but it seemed like he was more like, oh, well, you're gonna have to agree to disagree on some of this stuff. But one of Biden's biggest polls was being seen as honest and trustworthy. Like that polling, the question of honest and trustworthy, is something that he always polled better than with when compared to Biden, when compared to Trump and other Republicans, because people liked him more and he seemed more honest and trustworthy. The problem is, after the debate performance, people felt like they were lied to about his health and well-being, and how old he was, and how problematic his age was, because he was so quiet during his entire presidential campaign. Is that when that came out, people felt lied to, and he lost a lot of points when it comes to people believing that he's honest and trustworthy, which is one of the big drivers for people voting for him, outside of him being, not Trump, because he wasn't winning on almost any other on any other like topic that people were casting their vote for, like whether or not where he was underwater when it comes to Trump on who would do better on the economy, on immigration, on inflation, on energy, on like the future. Right? He was unfortunately really neck and neck sometimes, depending on the poll, with Trump on like who would preserve democracy. Crazy, right? All of those types of things. Were problems for him, which made it so that he could not win the election, and his coalition that he needed to rebuild was not something that he could replicate, because he can't have those people, because those people don't want to come home, right? You'll need to. I said it before, but this was not a race. This was not a race of Biden versus Trump, because everybody has an opinion on Trump already, and Trump has a ceiling. We know it. It's about 46% of the vote. It was a race of Biden versus Biden. He needed to convince people that his brain isn't melting out of his ears. He can run the election. He can remain in the presidency without any problems. He deserves a second term, and they should come out and support him so that he can get that done. And he couldn't do that. He can't convince people of that. He couldn't. I think he could have beforehand, but after the debate, that became an impossible task. It became a Herculean feat. And so then he became upset afterwards, because he thought that he was doing everything correct when it comes to like, oh, I need to prove that I'm fit for office and all that. But when that wasn't the case. It's over. It was over. Okay? It was over. All right? That debate, it was over. It was Jover. It was over beforehand, but then it became Jover. There was no recovery that was possible after that point. And it was something that I think people needed to understand, because everybody was coming out saying like incredibly like, rude and even degrading things about people who were pushing for Biden to step out, when it was just very proven that there was no possibility of him being able to win. He just couldn't win. And let me pull up 270 to win so I can show you something. Because I didn't pull this out before. I didn't pull this out while I was talking, because I just want to show you this really quick. Let's pull up the Trump v. Biden. Who's favored to win? Trump or Biden? It got frozen, but net polling. Sure. They paused it. So let me see. Yeah, so the polling average was Trump plus 3.2. The adjusted average was Trump plus 1.5. But let's go with the 3.2 just to prove a point here. So here is 2024. Okay, this is what 2024 looks like. And after the debate, Biden was polling minus 3.2 on the when it comes to the general election national vote percentage compared to Trump. That would be like 7 points to the right of where we are here. So let me see if I can pull up let me see if I can pull up the vote share for the 2020 election. So I can see every state here. Uno momento. The electoral map. I think CNN can do this for me. Fuck Missouri. This is going to be an illustrative tool. Man, CNN doesn't want to pull up for me. It does this sometimes. It's really annoying. 2020 by the numbers. Is this it? I just want to see where it was won by each state. That's what I really want. Ugh, this is annoying. Okay, yeah, let's see. Minnesota, that was... Yeah, so he won it by 7. So that would... So he won... Let me add this. So he won Minnesota by 7. That would move... and so this is minus 6, right? So he would win Minnesota by a tilt margin. Wisconsin would be like, since he only won it, he won it by 20,000 votes, less than a single percentage point. This would move to likely red. This would move, that would be likely for Michigan, and I believe likely as well for Pennsylvania. 2, he won. New Jersey would move down from safe to likely. He was polling at like 20. Yeah, he's polling at 20 percentage points in New York. So we would leave that there. This would bring New Hampshire to tilt Democrat as well. Georgia would be a blowout. That'd be likely red. New Mexico, he won by a similar margin. That would bring it down to tilt, because he would win it by 1 percentage point. Colorado, we would leave as safe here. New Nevada, he won by only 3 percentage points, so this would move it to likely red as well. Virginia, he won by 10, so this would move this down to lean Democrat. Down here, yeah, Pennsylvania, all these states would go. And so this is the map that we were staring down the barrel of. Trump at 312, right? And the polling was only getting worse where Biden was sitting. And so let me show you, if this continued on and Biden kept doing gaffes and problems kept arising, we were looking at a tilt Virginia. Mind you, Hillary Clinton won Virginia by 3 percentage points. And Trump would probably overperform the polls like he normally does. We're looking at a possible red New Mexico, a possible red New Hampshire, as well. We would move. Oh yeah, no, it would, yeah. New Jersey would move down to lean. Yeah, likely for all of these, because he was polling about like 6 points or so in all of these. Biden in the recent polling before he dropped out for Virginia, he was polling about even with Trump, like 50-50 as well. Nevada would stay here as well. Colorado, remember, Hillary Clinton won Colorado by I think 5 points, so this would move down to lean. Trump was making great gains against Biden in Minnesota, but I'll put this as toss-up because it would be actually a complete toss-up about what would possibly happen as well. Biden was polling in some polls around like 10 to 15 in New York, but I'll move this down to likely just to illustrate what we were kind of looking at. In Maine's districts, we were looking at a possible lean of Maine's second district, but not Maine at large, as far as I remember. And so this was the map. This is the map that we were staring down the barrel of at the time when Biden stepped out of the race. And a lot, like some people who are like really pro Biden, they don't want to believe this. They don't want to believe that this is true. But the fact of the matter is that 2020 was exceptionally close. It was very close, closer than a lot of people were expecting it to be. And because Trump overperformed the margins that we thought that he would, and he's probably going to do it again this election cycle as well. Likely New York is the craziest shit ever. And a lot of people, they find it hard to believe that. But remember, Kathy Hochul, what percentage did Kathy Hochul win her election by? 7. Kathy Hochul won her election by 7 percentage points in New York over a Republican. Okay, so the likelihood that New York couldn't get down to likely is laughable if you actually know what you're talking about. They absolutely could, because it literally happened with a bad Democrat. Oh, would Virginia vote for a Republican statewide? Well, guess who their fucking governor is right now? Okay. All right. Let's not be stupid here for a moment. This is what we were staring down the barrel of. This is what we were staring down the barrel of. This is very possible. Oh, actually, Oregon would go down to likely as well. Sorry. Oregon would go down to likely as well. Yeah. Yeah, Oregon would go down to likely. So yeah, this is what we were looking at. And this is the problem for why people genuinely believe that Biden should step out of the race, because this is a generational loss. Okay? This is horrible. This would be one of the worst elections ever. And yes, Florida would be safe, probably. Florida would become like a safe state. Trump would probably win it by Virginia margins, like 10 percentage points. It'd be an absolute blowout. Yes, it'd be horrible. Because look, Biden would be under 200% here. And it's very possible that this map could happen. It's not unlikely that this map could happen. If you just look at the polling and see the direction that polling was moving, this is very possible. This is very possible. The amount of crawling back that Biden would need to do with voter groups was something that he wasn't able to do, because if he was, he would have done it before 3 months before the election. That's what would have happened. Upstate New Yorkers are demons. We had record turnout on both sides, right? Yes, record turnout on both sides. And remember, Trump is on a generational run right now, and it's probably, and at least some remnants of that run is going to last all the way up until the election, meaning that he's probably going to be at a high point or near his high water mark for the rest of the election cycle, and Biden was going to be at his lowest point ever. Oh yeah, I forgot as well. I think Nebraska's second district actually would be a toss-up. Sorry, forgot about that. It'd either be lean, it'd be either lean D or like tilt D, or a toss-up. This is purely based on polling. Okay, so one thing is that this isn't completely based on polling. It's based on other fundamentals of the race outside of polling as well. So one thing is that you can look at economic factors. People are really down about the economy. that means that the ruling party is going to suffer. The ruling party is going to suffer a loss, erosion in their vote share. That's just something that we know is going to happen. Okay, that's that we don't need to, like, yes, you're polling people on how they feel, but we know how they feel now, and it was way more likely that they are going to lose vote share, and re-election campaigns lose vote share as well anyways. Okay, so economic indicators were showing that Biden was going to do worse. We know that. Fundraising was also something that he was lagging behind on. It was lower than they were. It was lower than they were expecting. Also leading to you believing that the enthusiasm and people wanting to turn out and support this campaign was also lower too. And on this, because I hate when people are like, polls have been shown to be unreliable in recent elections. How's the music? This is not true. This is not true. Even in 2020, my bad, even in 2024, which was known, sorry, I can't speak. Even in 2022, which was known to be an election that had shaky polling, that was one of the worst disparities in polling. Even then, most of the time, the polling was in the margin of error. 2016 polls were absolutely right. 2016 polls were absolutely right. When people say that 2016 polls were wrong, what they mean is like what Zan said. He was talking about a forecast and projection models. And those weren't even wrong either, because they gave Trump between a 20 and 30% chance of winning the election. Would you hop into your car to drive to work tomorrow if I told you it had a 20 or 30% chance of blowing up? Would you get mad at me if you're sitting in a flaming car after you turn the key on, after I told you it had a 20 and 30% chance of blowing up? You would sit there and look at me and be like, I can't believe you fucking lied to me and told me that I had an overwhelming chance for the car to not blow up. Obviously, there's a high chance of it blowing up. 20% is huge. It's massive. It's literally 1 in 5. What are you talking about? What are you saying? It's insane to me. 1 in 5, 1 in 3. That's a crazy high amount. You would not take those chances with anything. With something that bad. It was very possible for Trump to win. He won by 60,000 votes across 3 states. Hillary Clinton's lead in the polling aggregate before the election was literally 2 points. 2.5, 3 points. The average margin of error for polls is between 3 and 4. 2016 was well within the margin of error for polls. People saying that polls were so wrong is ridiculous. It's wrong. They're wrong. It's cope. You know why? Because everybody says the polls are wrong and the polls are fake when they're losing. When they want to win and the polls are showing them winning, the polls are great. They're fantastic. When they want to win and it's showing them losing, the polls are terrible and they're fake. Okay, that's what's going on. Okay, when they felt like they should have won when they didn't, and when the polls said that it was possible that you could possibly win and you don't, you say the polls are wrong. They're not. They're not wrong. They weren't wrong at all. They were quite right. They were quite right. Very right. If you ran the 2016 election 100 times, yes, I would absolutely say that Hillary Clinton would win between 60 and 80% of the time. The problem is you only flip the coin once. And 20 to 30% of those flips were going to be we're going to be bad. And we got the bad timeline. That's just how that works, okay? Polling wasn't wrong. It was very right. It was correct in 2016. It was less correct in 2020. It was even less correct in 2022. In some ways, in some states. Some states have really bad polling. Wisconsin is known for being a difficult state to poll. Absolutely. I will say that 100%. 100% is a difficult state to poll. But when people say wrong, what they mean is they look at the top line number, which is, but this poll says 1%, and the other one down 1%. So that means we definitely win because we up in the poll. No, okay. And also something that you need to understand is that you need to add the margin of error of a poll to both candidates in either direction. Okay, so if a poll is like 50-45 with a margin of error of 3 percentage points, it is one candidate that's at 50 could be at 53 or 47. And the other candidate that's at 45, okay, they could be between 47 or 42. All right, That's how the margin of error works. A lot of people don't get that. But the polls are right, okay? The polls are right. And the problem is, look at me, okay? The problem is, even if the polls were more wrong, you would never take the percentage chance that Biden had to win. Never, ever, ever, ever with anything, okay? With literally anything. It's completely ridiculous. It's genuinely insane. Genuinely insane. The race was a complete. It's actually malpractice for me to say the race was a toss-up. A 2 percentage point general election polling polling for a Republican is generational. It's a generational loss. It's a generational loss for a Democrat. Generational. We would see a loss that would be written about in the history books. That type of generational loss. It would be staggering. You would fall to your fucking knees, okay? If we were truly in a Trump +2 or Trump +3 environment, over. Finished. Kaput. Dunzo. All right? I can't even think of more. Doo-doo dumpstered. All right? You don't even get it. Polling was fine. Polling was absolutely fine. And you explained it a lot better than most pundits for why Biden should have dropped out. Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate you. But yes, no, polling was fine in 2016. It was 2016 landed well within the margin of error of where the polls said the race could possibly be. All right? Well within the margin of error. Polling isn't all right. Okay. It was wrong in 2020. It was slightly off in 2020. It was slightly out of the margin of error in 2020. But here's the thing. Okay? Once again, if you want to say that there was a polling error, you have to then say in what direction, okay? Here's the problem. Republicans more likely than not overperform polling. That's just something that you need to understand, is that they usually overperform polling. In these last election cycles, usually, except for 2022, where they didn't overperform polling. But they usually overperform polling. We know that to be true. Except for this election cycle at the moment, when it comes to special elections, kind of. But they're more likely to overperform rather than underperform. And I know that this is true because when you look back at the most popular polls that are talked about these days, like CBS, YouGov, Reuters Ipsos, Marist, Marquis, Quinnipiac, Pew, all of these polls, when they're wrong, guess which side that they benefited rather than underestimated? Democrats. Okay, they usually the polls usually the polls benefit Democrats. So if we were to understand that and then apply that to the election, you are making the case, whether you know it or not, that Trump wasn't actually up 2 or 3. He might have been up 4 to 6. Which would be a 10 point, which would be between a 6 to 10 point swing from 2020. So yes, I agree with you that sometimes polling is wrong. The problem is that when it's wrong, it usually benefits Republicans, which means that if it was wrong, Donald Trump was heading for maybe even the most generational, one of the most generational elections. It would be an election that we would have seen in like the mid 1900s, not an election of like hyperpartisanship that we see today. Way worse. Way worse. So yes, you can make the argument that sometimes polling is wrong. Go ahead. It only supports Donald Trump. Election predictions for who would win was way off in 2016. Incorrect. Incorrect. If I told you that your car had a 25% chance of blowing up when you step into it, and it blew up once you stepped into it, you wouldn't tell me that I was incredibly wrong. You just wouldn't. You would be like, oh my gosh, that's such a high percentage chance of it blowing up, of me stepping into it. OMG, that's totally gonna blow up if I step into that car. And here's one here. I'll add this. If the polls were wrong this election cycle, they would have to be more wrong than polls have ever been in the history of modern polling for Joe Biden to win. Okay? And if you want to bet democracy and the future of this country on hopefully the polls being more wrong than polls have ever been in the history of modern polling, go ahead. I'm not taking that. I'm not taking that bet with you. Have fun. Have fun with that. But I'm not taking that bet with you. Sorry. I'm not betting that. That's a horrible bet. Shark, you don't understand. All we need is a polling discrepancy more wrong than the history of modern polling ever, and then Joe Biden will win. Obviously, he shouldn't have stepped out of the race. His chances of winning were so good. Okay, buddy. Okay, take that. Go ahead. You know what? Step through the wormhole where Joe Biden didn't. Go on. We set up a time machine. We set up a link through dimensions, a parallel universe where Joe Biden never stepped down. Go ahead. Step on through. Go ahead. Go ahead. Have fun. Don't worry. Don't worry. All you need to do is bet on the polls being more wrong than the history of polls have ever been ever, and everything would be fine, right? Don't worry. The car will only blow up 70% of the time. Go ahead. Listen, 30%'s huge. So obvious. So, I mean, you have a really good chance of the car not blowing. 30%'s huge. That's 1 out of 3, right? Go ahead. Step through the portal. Have fun. I'll close it behind you. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. Go ahead. Guys, all we need is the best luck the universe has ever seen, and then we would have won. We totally shouldn't have changed tactics. Okay. All right. Sure. Yeah, if that's your argument, then I mean, have fun. Have fun through the portal, bucko. Go on. Go on, step on through. All we need is the best luck in the history of the universe. That goes against all history. And the win is ours. All right. Sure. Easy. Easy rares, right? I'm gonna get the lucky rabbit's foot. You just watch. All right, I'll watch. I'll watch from a safe distance through the portal. I'll put my shade. I'll bring up a lawn chair. Don't worry. I'll watch. Go ahead. Step on through. Show me what you got. I got your back, buddy. I'll be holding on to the rope to pull you through if things go south. Yeah, go on. But yeah, anyways, this is why I believe that it was a fantastic thing for Joe Biden to step out of the race. And it was a great option for Kamala Harris to enter the race because Kamala Harris has a fantastic chance to win. I don't believe at the moment that she's favored. I don't believe she's favored to win, but I do believe that she is in a much better position than Biden ever has been in this election cycle and ever would have been in this election cycle. And the reasons are more evident than they have ever been. And there's no reason to believe otherwise if you look through all of the data that we have. Kamala Harris is doing fantastically. When people talk about her and the energy around her campaign, many people are like, comparing it to 2008 levels of enthusiasm, and it shows. The best funding day, the two biggest funding days in the history of funding history for a campaign of the history of the United States for a campaign is something that you cannot scoff at. She's doing perfect. She's doing not perfectly. She's doing great. She's doing great, and I'd love to see where her floor is. She has not stopped gaining in the polls, which is great. I'm not sure when she will, if she will. Actually, I would hazard to guess she would at some point. When, I don't know. And what that is, I'm not sure. But we do know that it's probably higher than Trump's floor, seeing as Biden was tied in some polls sometimes. While Biden was tied in some polls sometimes. Well, also Kamala having a much better opportunity to pick up voters that Biden simply could not. And to let you know, like I was of the position, once again, earlier in July, I was of the position that Joe Biden could still win and could pull out a W. But the further July went on, and the worse, and the more I looked into the data, even pre-debate, the more I realized that simply was not true. It simply was not true. He didn't have it in him. He didn't have it in him. He couldn't do it. He could not rebuild the campaign. He could not rebuild the voter group that he needed to be able to win. Again, he just could not do it. He could not do it. And Kamala is doing fantastic. And many people are coconut pilled. Been worse if there was an open convention. Oh, open convention was such a horrible idea. Pelosi was like doped out of her mind to believe that an open convention was a good idea. It was probably one of the worst ideas. Genuinely terrible. Horrible fucking idea. No, terrible idea. Terrible idea. Absolutely coronate Kamala Harris, crown her, give her a tiara, get down on fucking one knee, okay? Bow to her as well. She is the princess. She is the queen. Absolutely coronate her. Put her in a fucking castle too. I do not care. Yes. Oh, but people won't want a coronation. Okay, get fucked. Yeah, for one, they did. Okay, if you looked at the polling and you asked people who you wanted to take over after Biden, there was a plurality and there was no like just straight out leader. But one person's name always came up on top, and that was Kamala Harris. People wanted Kamala Harris to take over the campaign, and it makes perfect sense. She's the vice president, when her literal job is to step in once the president can't do the job anymore. Obviously, she would step in. Obviously, she would take over the like all the campaign infrastructure that somebody else would have to build over 3 months. Right now, I'm not sure if you know it, we're 35 days away from the first state starts their sending out early ballots and doing early voting. North Carolina does early voting in 35 days. That's where it begins. This election isn't even actually on November 5th. It's way closer than that. It's in like September and October. That's where the election really begins. That's where the election begins. That's when people can cast their ballots. And somebody would just get their campaign off the ground by the time that came around. It was a horrible idea to put somebody else up there besides Kamala Harris. And it was a fantastic idea to coronate her. Absolutely coronate her. Bow down to the coconut queen. Yes, absolutely. So let me take you through what I personally believe we're looking at. We're just going to go off of like safe and not safe right now, because I just don't, we don't need to go too crazy at the moment for what we're doing. Right. So let me just take a look at all this really quick. Okay. So where I think Kamala Harris stands right now, if I'm going to be honest with you, is that she picks up Nebraska's first. And I do believe she picks up, Maine at large and everything. She picks up the 2 of the 3 main districts. I genuinely believe that. Right now, I personally believe that she's on track to win Michigan definitely. Out of all of these states, I believe Nevada is a toss-up because we just don't have enough information at the moment to be able to prove that's going to be happening. Let me turn this. We don't have enough data to prove that Nevada is back in a good place for her, because we have almost no polls post dropout at the moment, where that poll Nevada really at all. I believe Arizona is a toss-up right now. Wisconsin is a toss-up at the moment, as well as Georgia and Pennsylvania. So this is where I believe right now we stand when it comes to Kamala Harris, which I feel like is way better than where we were before. Way better. She doesn't have to focus on Minnesota or Virginia. She doesn't have to focus on New Mexico either. So all her money can go to the actual states that genuinely matter. Now, she's been having a great ground game in Nevada, so I believe that she has the opportunity to pick up Nevada. But I'm just not sure if that's going to happen. With Nevada's been creeping red, and also something that, but also what's a good thing is that Kamala Harris is doing much better than Joe Biden was with the Latino vote. Apparently playing Despacito at the Latino American conference didn't actually win him the Latino vote. And remember back in 2020, he said that Latinos were not a part of his pathway to victory. So he actively neglected Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, the Florida, all of these states that have a large Hispanic population. And now obviously he still won Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia, but he obviously lost Florida by an even worse margin. If you're going to ask me where I think the race is going to end up at the moment, I believe she picks up Nevada. She holds Nevada. I believe she loses Arizona. I just don't see her having much pull in Arizona at the moment, but that could change, right? Lots of things can change between now and election day. Wisconsin is very sticky for her, so I'm going to mark that as red just to be more conservative. I believe it's Susquehanna, a poll based in Pennsylvania that polls Pennsylvania and has a great track record on Pennsylvania, showed that she is doing very well, up between 4 and 5 points. So I actually believe that she has the possibility of winning Pennsylvania as well. The problem is that would not bring her all the way up to 270, and this would be a very close election. So then obviously it hinges on Georgia. Now she's doing far better than Joe Biden did when it comes to Georgia black voters. The problem is that she's doing slightly worse when it comes to white and moderate Republican voters, and those fill up the ranks in Georgia. So she would have to really, really run up the margins in Fulton and the surrounding counties for her to be able to pick it up. But I think she can do it. I think it's possible. I think it's very possible. But we could see something. We could see something like this, right? We could see something like this. We could possibly see, something like this as well. I think this is very possible. Now, one thing that you'll notice is that I think that these three battleground states, the Rust Belt states, have a very high possibility of voting differently than each other this election cycle, and I genuinely do. Kamala Harris seems to be doing a whole lot better in Michigan and Pennsylvania than she is in Wisconsin from what we see at the moment. But will that stand? I'm not really sure, but what we do know is that she has the possibility to get it done. But I think that she wins. My dream scenario, right, looks something like this. She picks up Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, and then she basically just runs back 2020. But my dream scenario goes even further than that, actually, where she picks up North Carolina because her great relationship with Roy Cooper, and they've been doing a lot of campaigning down there, and it seems like North Carolina is starting to trend back in her direction. That would also be great, actually. So to hold down all these states, have the Bleast Coast, and also have have the Blessed Coast, and then also have the Bleast Coast as well would be very possible. Only without South Carolina and Florida, I don't believe that can happen this election cycle. Like Florida has just gone way too far red for that to happen. As also Texas becomes way closer of a state, possibly within 4 points instead of 5 points like it was last election cycle, which I think would be fantastic and bodes well for Democrats in the future. This is my dream scenario I think this is Kamala Harris's maximum, but I think where it's much like more likely that we see something along these lines, where it's actually a very close election. Just because Donald Trump is doing very well. He's just very well liked. Now, whether or not his honeymoon phase continues on is something, it's to be seen, and where Kamala Harris goes when it comes to her approval rating and people just rating her generally and people wanting to vote for her. We're just going to have to see where that goes. I'm not sure, but right now I believe Kamala Harris is trending in the direction of being favored to win right now. When it comes just to straight up polling, I believe we're much more likely to see something like this at the moment, possibly like this, right? With the most conservative polling for her. But I think a lot of places are going to look a whole lot more like this at the moment, where Trump would be favored to win. All he would really need is to pick off like one of these states, right? Except for Nevada. If he just picks off Nevada, he would need something else, right? But I think this is where the map stands, specifically on like polling right now and fundamentals that we're looking at right now. But obviously Harris has been gaining, and she is now the presumptive nominee, soon to be actual nominee. So we'll see what that does to her polling as well. I think all of our dream scenarios end with her winning all the swing states. I mean, yeah, that'd be great, right? If the election was held today, I think she wins outright. No. Trump's just too strong right now. He's just too strong right now. He's simply just too strong right now. Simply just too strong. Simply just too strong. Immigration's too big of an issue. Inflation's too big of an issue. He's in his honeymoon period right now. Too big of an issue. Far too big of an issue. I just don't. He's favored to win right now, whether we want to accept it or not, unfortunately. And let's just take a look at this really quick. This is his best approval rating ever. Okay. He literally has never had a better approval rating than he does right now. Never. In the history of Donald Trump has. I think he had slightly better. Yeah, 8.2 there. This is like the second best approval rating that he has ever had. Take a look at some of these polls, okay? Some of them came out with him positive, okay? -1, +2, +3. YouGov, like a really high ranked pollster, -7, -9. Civics, a relatively high pollster, B pollster, -14. That's pretty good for Trump, actually. -5 here as well. 8, 6. Obviously like +2, -1, -3. My bad. +3, +6, +3. Oh, my bad. That's unfavorable. But yeah, he's -3, right? -3, -1, -3, -6 when it comes to favorable, unfavorability ratings. Donald Trump he's very popular right now. Whether we want to believe it or not, he is incredibly strong right now. He is incredibly strong right now. He is the strongest Trump ever. And we could want to accept that or not. It doesn't really matter. It's the fact of the matter. It's the truth. Now you can look at Joe Biden's polling. Joe Biden's polling improved to -17. It peaked at -20. My bad, -20.2 is where it actually peaked. -20 to, at the same time, Trump was -12. -20 versus -12. Right? And that's what I mean, that Biden was overperforming his disapproval, which I expected him to do. The problem is that he was too disapproved of to be able to win. And like, oh wait, all we need to do was wait longer and people were gonna vote for him. No, they weren't. Look at this trend. Look at this trend. It literally only got worse. He literally only got more disliked the longer the election cycle went on. It was literally moving in the opposite direction. He was cooked. Cooked. -23, -20, -16. Do you see a single digit here? -9 is his best. -9 is best. -24 was his worst. Cooked. Cooked. He's not strong. He is strong with JD Vance as well. JD Vance is a problem. He's still strong. Like, I'm sorry. I don't want to. I hate to be the one to tell you this, but as JD Vance has been a part of the ticket, his approval rating has gotten better. Now, once again, I believe it's because of his honeymoon period. And I believe that this number will go back down again before the election. But no matter what you think, he's well approved of, right? Look at where Kamala Harris's approval rating was before this. -16. Now it's -6. She's doing a whole lot better than she was and having more positive approval ratings, right? But right now she's only 2 points more approved of than Donald Trump, okay? He's very strong. He's incredibly strong right now. Don't delude yourself into believing that he's some super beatable chump character that you can run anybody against and they'll just wash him. It's not true.